Hi, I'm John from Our Home from Scratch, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to replace an outside water faucet. Okay, so this is the Silcock, or the outside spigot that's on the side of my house, and if I try to turn it on, I can't actually get any turns out of it. And when I put a wrench on it, it actually started to break a little bit. So instead of busting it, I'm just going to replace it. So I went out and got a new one, and this is what they look like. So this part is visible from the outside of the house, and this part, the rest of this pipe goes on the inside. So what I'm going to do is pull it out probably, and it's got two areas to receive screws, exterior screws, and they're behind this putty. So I'm going to take this putty off, unscrew the fasteners, and I can then pull it out and replace it. All right, so we're here in the basement, and I've got my main water supply line here. I've got a regulator, and just below that is a shutoff valve, and it goes up the wall and then out to the rest of the basement. So the leg, or the supply line for the outside spigot, is right here. So the good news is there's actually a shutoff valve here. So what I can do is I can isolate this line just by closing this valve. So now I can work on this from the valve over to the spigot without having really any worry about any water coming in through my main line. Okay, so here's my vertical piece of white PEX, and it makes a 90 through a fitting and then goes right out the side of the house. So ideally what I do is I'd really like to make a cut right around here outside the house and let it drain out, and then undo my siphon nut and let the rest of it drain at the same time. So what I'm going to do is there's a clamp right here holding it in place. What I'm going to just do is pop that off, okay, free it from the clamp, and now what I can do is I can unfasten the spigot from the side of the house and pull it out, and this should have enough slack to get this part exposed outside the house where I can cut it safely. Okay, so I've got my fasteners out, and I can give it a pull, and it comes right out. The only issue is it doesn't come out all the way, and that's because either the PEX piping is keeping it from coming out, or there's a fitting on the end of this that's too wide for the hole, which was put on after this was inserted into the house. So that means I'm going to have to make my cuts inside and then come back out here to finish it up. Well, that stunk. So what I'm going to have to do now is cut this pipe someplace where it will be easy to fix, but also kind of avoid getting water near my electrical panel. If this were anywhere else in my basement, I would probably just cut it right up there. But I don't want to send water in my panel. So what I've done is I've hung up some plastic tarp and put it behind the pipe I'm going to cut, and I've also draped it over the electrical panel over there. So I'm pretty confident that when I cut this, if any water sprays out, it really won't get anywhere in the panel. I've also got the little drain valve we took off earlier. I've got that opened, so as soon as I cut it, hopefully the gravity will force it out over here. So I'm going to go ahead and make my cut. I'm using, these are like pipe trimmers, and I'm going to try to cut it in the straight section of the pipe because I have a nice union that I can fix this with, and I want to avoid any of the curved areas if possible. So what I'm going to do is just squeeze it and twist a little bit, and I'm going to work on this side, vice the other, because again I want to keep water from spraying. Okay, so it's already peeing out over here. Okay, so water's coming out of that other drain valve. It just went all over my leg. So I'm going to let this finish draining. And I also turned my main valve off just to make sure that this valve wasn't screwed up, as I didn't want this water coming out of me at full pressure. All right, and I put a garbage bag here to catch it too. All right, so this pipe is going to twist and squeeze. All right, now we have a severed connection. We just have a little bit of water draining out here. Most of the water came out my little drain plug, and we are good to go. So now what I can do is I can cut it here All right, and I can be a little more aggressive with it. Great. All right, so a little water comes out, but now what I can do is I can put a couple wrenches on the Silcock and on the fitting, and what I'll be able to do is pull out the Silcock from outside, and then I can run the new one into the inside of the house. Okay, so with this piece removed, this Silcock should just push right out of the house. Fitting off the end of the pipe, I can just pull it right out of the house. All right. Make sure everything's clear out of there. And what I've gone and done is put on some pipe tape already on the end of this, because it'll be easier for me to do it out here than it will be for when I'm working in that tight space. And I'm also going to apply a good amount of silicone caulk to this joint. So I'll put it in the holes, basically around the perimeter. I'm going to put it on there pretty liberally, and I'll also put it on the back of this pipe. So what this will do is keep the keep water from going inside the house. All right. So now all we got to do is put some screws in there, and we're done out here. So I'm going to get each hole started. All right. So I'm going to get each hole started before I drive these home. To make things easier on myself, I'm going to use the same holes as the previous one. Okay, so we're done out here. My anti-siphon features seated okay. My valve works fine. I'm going to make sure it's closed out here first. And what I can do later is I can come back and wrap this in some conduit sealant like was on there before, but the silicone alone should be fine. So with the pipe through the basement wall, I can now actually put a new set of Teflon tape. I took the old one off, put the new one on. It ended up getting a lot of junk on it, pushing it through the house, so I started fresh. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch fitting that goes to a 1/2 inch PEX. Now the pipe ended up coming with the fitting that was plastic, but I kind of like this brass one better. So we're going to go with this guy. And again, I'll need 2 wrenches for this part. One to hold the pipe, and the other to tighten it. Okay, so for the next step, with the fitting on there, I've gone ahead and made an elbow with my PEX piping here. I've cut a short section here that will bring me from this fitting over to this bulkhead, this joist, and then down. And I've already gone ahead and put the elbow on here simply because trying to crimp while it's back up in here is going to be a pain, but crimping it on the fitting shouldn't be too hard. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is, I've also got my crimp ring already on there too. I'm going to go ahead and try to put this in place. All right, fits on very nicely. I'm going to position this where I want it, left to right. Actually, I want it on that side. All right, so it looks good. I'm going to slide my crimp ring forward. Okay, so there's about a 1/4 inch between the fitting and the crimp ring. All right, right around there. Next, I'm going to take my crimpers, and these are a jaw style crimper, and what I'm going to do is actually pull back on this handle, and that opens the jaw, and then I can drop it on the crimp ring, squeeze the pliers, and that will crimp it. So I'm going to position this back over here to the side where I have plenty of room to work. I move the insulation out of the way. I'm going to drop the jaws on it. And I'm just going to give this a nice double-handed squeeze. All right. The crimpers will come engaged all the way. Open up the jaws, pull it off. They look pretty good over there. Okay, so we got our connection made up at the Silcock, and we have an elbow down with a piece of PEX I've added. And I've got my original PEX, which kind of runs across. So the way this was run before was, instead of there being sort of like a 90-degree fitting here, which I could do, it kind of had a graceful curve and tied into the old one. So I'm going to continue that. If there were some 2x4 structure here, something to clamp on this elbow, I would probably do an elbow because it's a little cleaner. But what I'm going to do is kind of hold this down and line these two up together over here. So my old pipe where I cut it meets my new pipe, my new PEX pipe right about there. And what I'm going to do is just put a pencil mark right where those two meet. And what I can do is when I join them, I can actually push on this one. Your top pipe, your spigot, should actually be angled out of your house a little bit. So if there's any water in that Silcock, it runs out of the house. So having these two line up here is fine. And this, I want to make sure there's no pressure or stress on this little joint here. Since this is a 90, I don't want to be yanking on this. So to cut that, I'm going to use my tubing cutters. These are inexpensive. It's just like a razor blade and a clamp. And again, I'm just going to take this and kind of rotate it on here. Okay, looks good. Now to join these two, what I have is a little union fitting, and this is basically a nipple with a PEX fitting on either side. So what I can do is I can pop one end into my old pipe, pop the other end of the new one, add a couple crimp rings, squeeze on them, and we'll be done except for a clamp. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, I'm going to start by kind of pulling this apart, and I'll probably crimp the bottom one first. So what I'm going to do is slide on my crimp ring, drop in my fitting, and now is the tricky part. Get my crimpers, open up the jaw, slide up my crimp ring, place the crimp jaw with the crimper on the crimp ring, and then squeeze. Open it up. All right, so this side is good. All right, so we finished our plumbing work. We are ready to turn on the water supply. I've gone and double checked. I made sure all my fittings were nice and tight. Everything was crimped. I didn't forget to crimp any joints. If you forget something, you'll get a real bad water leak, and we don't want that, especially so close to our water panel or our electrical panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm slowly going to turn this water back on and make sure we don't have any leaks. Listening for any, should hear the water running to fill the pipe. We don't want to hear or see any water leaks. Okay, I'm slowly adding the water. Okay, water's back on, no leaks. So I think we're okay. So the next thing I'll need to do is just make sure the water runs outside and the faucet spigot works well. I think there's a perception that you're more likely to have leaks when the water's running. The reality is your water pressure is higher in your pipe when it's not moving, when it's pressurized. So there's water in the pipe from the main line, and the valve is shut. So right now the pipe is at the highest pressure it'll probably see. The water pressure will actually drop when you open up the valve. So we're more likely to have leaks right now than when we're running it. That's the bottom line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand in all the fittings, make sure we don't have any leaks, and we are good to go.